Hey everybody, thanks for being here today. My name's Eric Weitrall. I'm the Senior Consultant over here at Stochastic Marketing. And today I want to talk to you about one of the most important metrics in HVAC, and that is the lifetime value of a customer. And it is one of the most overlooked numbers that we could talk about. And I'm kind of flabbergasted by the fact that people don't use this more often. The reason is simple. Everyone spends a lot of time talking about the cost to acquire customers. But when I ask them, they never tell me what those customers are actually worth. Now, how can you measure the cost to acquire a customer if you don't know what that customer is worth? What does the first metric actually matter? If a customer is worth 50 grand or 500 grand or $500, I'm willing to spend varying amounts of money to acquire those customers. And if I don't have the answer to the second part of that puzzle, how can I get a number for the first half? So it's a really important metric in trying to target your advertising and make a decision what you're willing to spend to acquire a customer. It's also a really good metric to measure your sales progress. So if everyone else in the industry, in your region, in your AB group is getting X amount out of a house and you're only getting half that, if everybody's doing a killer job and everybody in your region is way above the average and you're way below the average, or maybe you're way above the average and everyone else is way below, you can measure how well your sales team's doing because maybe you're getting into the wrong houses. Maybe you have a sales problem. Maybe you have a culture problem. You can identify all those things with this one simple number. You really get to know how much a customer's worth to you. And there's a lot of things that go into that. There's who your customer is, where they are, and even when you get the money from the customer, when in their lifetime. And we could talk a lot about all of these today, but we want to stay on topic here. We've only got a few minutes. We're going to make this call about 10, 15 minutes long, and we're going to do some follow-up videos on all of these other topics in the future. But today I want to talk to you specifically, as I said, about what the lifetime value of an HVAC customer is. And I want you to answer that question for me first, because what you know about it now and what you know at the end of this call, I'm hoping are drastically different. So what I want you to do is I want you to send me what you think the average value of an HVAC customer is, and I want you to text it to the number on the screen. That number is 314-582-4995. And as you're coming up with this number and texting it to me, I want you to remember that this is not an average ticket or replacement value. I want you to think long-term, 10, 15, 20 years timeline, and everything you do at the house, whether it's service work, replacement, maintenance, repair, warranty, whatever you do, I want you to include it in that math. Add it all up, come up with a number, and text it to me. You got about 10 more seconds here, and then I'm going to move on to the next screen, and we're going to talk a little bit about the averages I see when I ask this question across the country. So as we get ready to move to the next string, you should be texting those over, and I'm going to be live responding to those text messages. If you're listening to this live, you're going to see some responses from me. And if you're listening to this at a later time, if you're listening to this recorded, I will also text you back, but I will text you back live while you're listening to it. So send those over. We're moving on, though, to the averages. So what's the estimated lifetime value I see as I ask this question across the country? And I've been asked this question for a decade. And the answers kind of fall into four categories. There are people who go in that $50,000 range. You see them, the big blue ball here on the top there. Most people think 3, 4 installs. I build the value, I get into the home, I do a repair, and I own that customer for life. It's not a minority. It's probably about a third of the respondents fall in that room. But about 50% of the group fall in the $30,000 range. I do a replacement or two at a home, and usually the scenario goes, I meet the customer, we do some maintenance, we do a repair, we do a replacement, we maintain that unit until it dies, we do another replacement, and then they move, something changes, and they move on. But I usually do about 2 replacements at that house. A small, kind of the minority group that would fall in this is the $15,000 range. I do 1 or 2 replacements, a little bit of service work, and not a lot in between. And then I do a single replacement, and I do a lot of service work, kind of the $10,000 range. So how did they come up with that number? Well, to get that answer, we're actually going to step out of the HVAC industry, and we're going to walk into the car industry. We're going to walk into a car dealership, and we're going to talk a little bit about the car dealerships fallacy. And the Car Dealerships Fallacy is pretty simple. And it's actually something they teach you when you become a car salesman. And that is that every time somebody walks into a car dealership, $100,000 walks through the door. Every new customer who walks in, every one of you salesmen should be chasing down because $100,000 walked through the door. So how do they get that number? Well, it's actually some pretty decent math and a pretty good sales technique on the dealership side, especially to the salesman. But the math's actually not terrible. People in this country, on average, buy four cars from a dealership over their lifetime. Now, that's new, that's used, all combined, 4 cars on average over your lifetime. The average price of a car sold in America at a dealership is $25,000. Again, that's new and or used, okay? So, math's pretty simple on that. 4 cars, $25,000, $100,000 just walked through the door. And your car dealership believes this. The car salesman believes this. How many of you have bought a car at a dealership and still have the dealer texting you years later, still have them sending you emails, giving you calls, following up with you on things? They want you to come back, because this is what they really teach. $100,000 walks through the door. All they have to do is keep that hook on the line. Of course, I'm sure as we've been talking about this, some of you thought to yourself, oh, well, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. Well, what could go wrong? Well, first and foremost, this person could move. And, you move from one state to another, it's kind of difficult to go back. The person could buy a car somewhere else. They may buy one car from you, buy another car somewhere else. They may drive it till the wheels fall off and only buy 2 cars over the course of their lifetime. And, of course, the most glaring detail, they haven't actually bought a car yet at all. And the majority of people who walk onto a dealership every day don't buy a car. The majority of people who walk onto the dealership, speak to a salesman, go home empty-handed. 3 out of 4 walk away every single day from every single salesman, and yet they still teach those guys that everybody who walks through the door is worth $100,000. And like I said, it's a great sales tool. And I'm betting you used a similar one in your mind as you were calculating the number for the average lifetime value of your customer. Probably went something like this. I'm going to get a call to a house that needs a repair. I'm going to go to that house. I'm going to do a great job. I'm going to get called back. And on that call back, I'm going to sign them up for a service agreement. I'm going to do great service for that customer, and I'm going to gain a customer for life. When that unit dies, I'm going to replace the unit, and then the order reverses. Then I'm going to go back to service the unit. I'll do any repair it needs. I'm going to replace the unit. Then I go back to the service unit. I want to do the repairs that are needed. I'm going to replace the unit. And this is a kind of a 10, 15-year cycle. And you just keep spinning through. And the number you came up with is just really the number of rotations through here, right? At about $10,000, maybe $15,000 a pop. So maybe you said it was $30,000. Maybe you said it was $50,000. That can vary by region. It's more expensive in California than Iowa. But that's how most people do the math. They come up with the idea that I'm going to do the service and maintenance, I'm going to replace the units, and then I'm going to get the average lifetime value of the customer. That's how I'm going to extract it. And that's why most people come up with $30,000, $40,000. The math's not wrong. The problem is just the number ends up being $2,637, not $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. Does that number seem low? It does to a lot of people. It did to me the first time I saw it, and I was making the same mistake everyone else was. And that mistake is really simple, and it's actually a trick of the human mind. You see, the reality of the situation is customers don't buy 2 and 3 systems from you. I'm going to say that again. Customers do not buy 2 and 3 systems from you. And as I said that, a number of you thought, I can think of so-and-so, Mr. Smith, who's bought 2 systems from me. Mrs. Smith has bought 3 systems from us. And that's true. And the fact that you can remember their names means they're a special event. How many of you can remember the 10-year-old unit you went out on even a month ago that was primed for repair, or the 17-year-old unit that was falling apart, but the guy just had you do the minimal amount and then said, I'm just going to have you fix it to the best of your ability. I'm not going to replace today. How many of you can remember the customers who had 17-year-old units who just did a tune-up? And the answer is you probably can't. The reason you can't is because those things are really common. They happen all the time. They're not exciting. It's the difference between an amazing birthday present and a pair of socks. Struggle to remember the pair of socks, right? But I can remember that fantastic gift that somebody put a lot of thought into. The same thing happens in the human mind with installs. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith have been buying systems from you forever, but they're the exception, not the rule. The reality is 50% of your customers, actually 51% of your customers, are worth less than $500. That means most houses you go to, it's a failure. In fact, the average value of these homes is $200, $200, which means the average house you go to, you don't actually make any money. You make all your money from the customers over here in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. That's where all the money lies. But the majority of the customers are worth less than $500. And size doesn't matter in this. If you're a $500,000 company to a $2.5 million company, it's 54% of your houses. If you're a $2.5 million to $5 million company, it's 52% of your houses. And the number shrinks a little bit as we go up. From $5 million to $10 million, we're still at 52, and then we're going to drop to 48% in the $10 million to $20 million range. So if you're a $10 to $20 million a year contractor, 48% of your customers are worth less than $500. Now that's a 6% swing, and the difference there is people in the $20 million range, in the $10 million range, have had to eliminate going to those bad houses because they've got overhead and other expenditures that they can't bear that much weight. They can't have 40, 50, 60%. Remember, this is an average across these companies. When I'm looking at some companies, I see numbers as high as 76% of their customers are worth less than $500. In one case, I had a customer at 74% of his customers with an average value of $166. But on that same call, in all cases, and I'm not talking 5 or 7 customers here, I'm talking 30. We've been able to have the conversation, identify the problem, and start to build them a path towards growth. And one of the strongest paths towards growth, as you can see here, just in that 6% shift, is eliminating those low-value homes. And that goes back to those 3 points we talked about on slide 2, which was who are your customers, where are your customers, and when do you get the money? And so I want to offer this to each and every one of you, whether you're a $10 million contractor, a $500,000 contractor, $3 million, 20 plus. I will run this report for you today. All I need is your data. And getting it to me is pretty simply. All you have to do is text my number here on the screen or email me at the email address on the screen, and I'll run this report for you. And I'll actually run you through all of our analytics and show you some of the cool stuff we can do, because that's kind of what we do here at Stochastic. We take big data, we run it through our analytics, and the big data is your data. You know, we've got $9 billion worth of HVAC and plumbing invoices on hand. That's $9 billion worth of invoices that we've run through our system. We'll take yours through, and I'll give you a report that shows what you're doing, and I'll also show you what everybody else is doing. And I can show you regionally. I can show you across the averages. I can show you state by state what you should be making, how much a customer should be worth, and how many of your customers are worth less than $500. And then we can build a plan. So my big ask from you today is text that number, shoot me an email, send me over your data, or pick up the phone. Let's have a conversation, and I'll walk you through this. Because having that conversation, like I said, I've had that conversation with hundreds of contractors across the country. And in every case, we've been able to identify the problems and build a plan to fix it in just a matter of minutes. In the case of that 76 and 74 range guys, we had the conversation done in 25 minutes. We already were working on a solution. 2-3 years later, they're down to 50 and 46% of their customers worth less than $500, and both having huge years into both 2018 and 2019. So pick up the phone, text me, or shoot me an email, and thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all. If you have any additional questions, you can also text to my email or to my text to my phone or send an email to me here. And again, thank you so much for visiting with us today.